He was once a man of honor. Now, his name is one no one dares to speak. In a quiet coastal town, the shadows of the past are beginning to stir. A storm is coming, a name buried in lies, a truth lost to time, and a dangerous fight to bring it all to light. Some truths come at a cost, but for some, running is no longer an option. Justice always finds its way back. If you love gripping mysteries, second chances, and the fight for justice, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Don't miss out on more incredible stories. There's always another secret waiting to be uncovered. The wind howled fiercely through the narrow alleys of the coastal town, rushing between the stone houses with a ghostly whistle. The salty air carried the scent of an approaching storm, and the sea, restless and churning, mirrored the unease that had settled over Marcus Hale's life. He stood at the edge of the fisherman's shelter, his gaze fixed on the horizon where dark clouds gathered like ominous sentinels of fate. His hands, rough and calloused from years at sea, carried more than just the marks of a fisherman's labor. They bore the weight of a past that refused to fade, grips that had tightened around gun handles, the cold steel of handcuffs, the sharp snap of a gavel sealing his fate. 5 years ago, Marcus had been one of the city's most respected detectives, a name spoken with trust and admiration. Now, in Harbor's Edge, his name was something else entirely, a curse whispered behind his back. Traitor, the townspeople murmured as he passed by, their voices like daggers in the wind. It didn't matter that he had protested his innocence. It didn't matter that the evidence had been falsified, the reports manipulated. All that mattered was the verdict, guilty. He had lost everything: his career, his reputation, the life he had built. He had been accused of orchestrating a high-profile armored vehicle heist, branded as the mastermind behind the botched operation that ended in tragedy. 2 men had died that day. One of them had been a fellow officer. And though Marcus had never pulled the trigger, the world had decided he was the one to blame. Yet, as he stood there, staring at the endless waves crashing against the shore, something stirred deep inside him. A quiet but unyielding truth. He wasn't done. Not yet. Harbor's Edge might have turned its back on him, but he knew one thing: truth had a way of surfacing, just like the tides. The gravel path crunched beneath his boots as he made his way into town. The scent of fresh bread drifted from the small bakery, momentarily cutting through the salt and damp air. He stepped inside and grabbed a loaf, letting the warmth seep into his hands. It reminded him of a time before all of this, before betrayal, before exile. A time when he was just Marcus Hale, detective. At the fishing supply shop, he picked up his gear. Old Joe, the shop owner, glanced at the darkening sky and shook his head. "Storm's coming," Joe muttered, pointing toward the gathering clouds with a weathered finger. Marcus only smirked. When has the sea ever been calm? By the time he reached the town's only bar, the Siren's Den, the sky was nearly black. The scent of rain mingled with the deep, soulful notes of blues music spilling out onto the cobbled street. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and thick with the hum of conversation, the scrape of chairs against the wooden floor, the occasional burst of laughter. Familiar faces turned toward him briefly before returning to their drinks. Fisherman Tom was hunched over a deck of cards at a corner table, a grin tugging at his lips as he shuffled. Near the bar, Elena, the town's veteran boat mechanic, lifted a glass in greeting. Still nursing his whiskey, she gave him a knowing smirk. "That red-haired woman's been asking about you." Marcus frowned slightly, catching the glass as she slid it toward him. He took a slow sip before replying. "Who are you talking about?" Before Clara could answer, movement in the corner of the bar caught his attention. A woman stepped out of the shadows, moving with a quiet confidence. Her deep red hair cascaded in soft waves over her shoulders, framing a face that was both striking and unreadable. Her eyes sharp, knowing met his for only a fleeting second before she turned away. Marcus didn't recognize her, but there was something about her presence. Something deliberate. Clara smirked. "That one." Marcus remained still as the woman approached, sliding into the seat beside him. Up close, there was an air of quiet authority about her, though when she finally spoke, her voice was soft, steady. "Detective Hale, isn't it?" His jaw tensed. His grip on the whiskey glass tightened. "No one uses that name anymore," he said coldly. Unfazed, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out an old newspaper clipping. The edges were worn, the ink slightly faded, but the headline was unmistakable. Disgraced detective behind armored truck heist. Beneath it, a grainy photograph him, standing in a courtroom, his expression unreadable. She slid the article toward him. The armored vehicle robbery. 5 years ago. She met his eyes again, her voice laced with urgency. I need to talk to you. Marcus drained his whiskey in one swift motion and set the glass down with a quiet thud. You've got the wrong guy, lady. My story's over. The woman, Clara, didn't flinch. She simply leaned in, her voice quiet but unwavering. I thought my story was over too, she murmured. I lost my husband to a police bullet. An officer who was framed. Just like you. Marcus felt something shift. A crack in the carefully built walls around him. He didn't know who this woman really was or what she wanted. But one thing was clear. The past wasn't done with him yet. And maybe, just maybe, neither was he. The truth I'm chasing is far more brutal than any fiction. Marcus studied Clara for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he caught the determined glint in hers. There was something about her gaze that awakened instincts he had long buried. The battle he thought he had left behind was stirring once again, rising from the depths of his past like a ghost refusing to be silenced. He shifted uncomfortably at her words, a deep tension tightening in his chest. Her questions were cutting too close to wounds he wasn't ready to reopen. He let out a slow breath, his expression hardening. I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't help you, he said curtly. Without waiting for a response, he downed the rest of his whiskey in a single gulp, set the glass down with a soft thud, and walked out of the bar, leaving Clara in thoughtful silence. The next morning, an unforgiving wind swept through the harbor, cutting like ice against the skin. Marcus tightened his coat as he made his way down to the docks. The storm from the previous night still lingered in the churning waters, leaving the sea restless, waves smashing against the piers in angry bursts of foam. He set about securing the fishing boats, checking knots and mooring lines, his mind lost in the routine until a sudden sharp scream shattered the morning stillness. Help! Liam's missing. Marcus jerked his head toward the voice and saw Clara sprinting across the dock, her face pale with panic. Villagers emerged from their homes, pointing toward the water. Marcus followed their gazes and spotted a small fishing boat drifting dangerously close to the jagged rocks at the harbor's edge. A small figure clung desperately to the side. That's Liam. Clara gasped, terror twisting her voice. Marcus didn't hesitate. He broke into a full sprint toward his boat, untying it with practiced speed. The motor roared to life as he steered toward the drifting vessel. The wind howled around him, whipping salt spray into his face as the waves grew higher, crashing against the hull with brutal force. Hang on, kid, he shouted, though his voice was nearly drowned by the storm. The small boat was barely holding together, creaking as it bobbed dangerously toward the rocks. Marcus maneuvered closer, each wave threatening to capsize him. Liam's terrified cries echoed over the water, blending with the fury of the wind. Stay there. I'm coming, Marcus yelled again, tossing a thick rope toward the boy. Liam reached out, his hands shaking from the cold, but the rope slipped from his grasp. Another wave struck, and the boat tipped violently. Marcus's stomach lurched as he watched Liam lose his grip and tumble into the icy water. Damn it, Marcus cursed under his breath. Without a second thought, he cut the engine and dove into the freezing sea. The cold hit him like 1,000 needles, stealing the air from his lungs. He forced himself to move, kicking through the chaotic waves, his eyes scanning the water until he saw a flash of Liam's red coat. Marcus surged forward, wrapping an arm around the boy just as he began to sink. I've got you, kid, Marcus muttered through chattering teeth, tightening his grip. Liam was barely conscious, his lips blue and trembling. Marcus turned toward the boat and fought against the powerful currents, every stroke of battle against exhaustion. A jagged rock scraped his leg, tearing through his pants and slicing into his flesh. The salt water stung the wound, but Marcus ignored the pain. His only focus was keeping Liam's head above water. Gritting his teeth, he kicked harder, finally reaching the side of his boat. With a surge of strength, he hauled Liam over the edge before collapsing onto the deck, gasping for breath. Liam, come on, kid, stay with me, Marcus whispered, quickly wrapping a blanket around the boy. He pressed his fingers to Liam's neck and felt a faint but steady pulse. Relief flooded through him as he cradled the boy closer. The boat rocked violently, But Marcus managed to restart the engine and steer back toward the harbor. As they neared the dock, he saw Clara waiting, her eyes wide with fear and desperation. She ran toward them as soon as Marcus secured the boat. "Is he Dash?" Clara's voice cracked, unable to finish the question. "He's alive," Marcus confirmed, carefully passing Liam into her arms. Clara sobbed in relief, holding her son tightly. "Thank you. Thank you so much," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding her pain more than she realized. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Let's get him warm. The weather's too harsh for him to stay out here. He needs medical attention." The villagers helped them into a nearby truck, and they drove to the local clinic. Inside, the warmth of the heaters began to thaw the cold from their bones. The doctor checked Liam thoroughly, assuring Clara that he would be fine after rest and warmth. Marcus watched as the tension in Clara's shoulders finally eased. "Thank you," she whispered again, meeting his gaze with a mixture of gratitude and vulnerability. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the clinic room as Marcus sat on the examination table, his pant leg rolled up to reveal a deep gash running along his calf. The doctor, an elderly man with steady hands, carefully cleaned the wound before preparing to stitch it. Marcus winced slightly but said nothing. "You're lucky it wasn't deeper," the doctor commented as he threaded the needle. "Another inch, and you might have been dealing with a severed tendon." Marcus exhaled, watching the needle work through his flesh. Just another scar, another mark of survival. But as he glanced toward Clara, holding her son close, he realized something. Maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. Marcus nodded silently, his gaze drifting to the floor. He had been through worse. The physical pain didn't bother him nearly as much as the memories that the day's events had stirred. On the other side of the room, Clara watched with quiet concern. Liam was resting in the next room, safe and recovering. She crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe, her eyes never leaving Marcus. "You really didn't have to risk your life like that," Clara finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. Marcus shrugged, his expression guarded. "It's what anyone would have done." "No," she said firmly, stepping closer. "Not anyone. Most people would have hesitated or frozen. You didn't." Marcus let out a bitter chuckle. "Old habits, I guess. Habits from a life you're still running from." Clara asked gently, her tone free of judgment but filled with curiosity. Marcus stiffened slightly. The doctor paused for a moment to glance between them, sensing the tension, then resumed his work in silence. "You don't know anything about that," Marcus muttered. "You're right," Clara replied. "But I want to understand. I saw the newspaper clipping. I know there's more to your story than what people here believe. You didn't just save my son today, Marcus. You saved me. Please, let me return the favor by listening." Marcus didn't respond immediately. The rhythmic tug of the needle pulling through his skin seemed to echo in the room. For a moment, he thought about brushing her off. He had spent years trying to bury the past, to live quietly in Harbor's Edge where no one asked questions. But something about Clara, the honesty in her eyes, the gratitude in her voice began to chip away at the walls he had built around himself. The doctor finished stitching the wound and began dressing it. "All set," he announced. "Take it easy on that leg for a few days." Marcus stood, testing his weight on the injured leg. He turned to Clara, meeting her gaze for the first time with something other than defensiveness. There was a long pause before he finally spoke. "All right," he said quietly. "You want to hear the truth? Meet me at Siren's Den tonight." A flicker of relief and determination crossed Clara's face. "I'll be there," she promised. Marcus gave her a small nod before limping out of the room. For the first time in a long while, he felt the faint stirrings of something unfamiliar hope. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to finally face the truth. Clara sat in her small rented cottage, staring at the laptop screen. The video file she had risked so much to obtain played in a loop, grainy security footage capturing the chaotic moments of an operation gone wrong. An armored vehicle heist that had ended in gunfire and death. The scene showed Marcus Hale, armed but clearly confused, rushing to cover as shots rang out. He wasn't firing. In fact, he seemed to be trying to protect someone. Seconds later, a masked figure appeared, pulling the trigger on another man. Clara's breath hitched. That man had been her husband. She paused the video and pressed her fingers to her temples. For 5 long years, she had searched for the truth, haunted by grief and the unanswered questions surrounding her husband's death. His murder had been swept under the rug, framed as part of a failed operation involving dirty cops and criminals. Marcus had been scapegoated, his reputation destroyed by a web of lies designed to hide something much larger. Clara had learned that a high-ranking official had paid a large sum to have security footage erased. Through backdoor negotiations, she'd managed to track down one of the intermediaries and retrieve the surviving footage, but at a cost, both financial and emotional. She had watched it countless times, hoping for a moment of clarity, for something that would tell her who had pulled the strings that night. At first, Clara had come to Harbor's Edge with one goal: find out if Marcus knew anything about the masked man who had killed her husband. She had expected a bitter, defeated man who might cling to secrets for leverage. But what she found instead had shaken her. Marcus wasn't broken. He was deeply wounded, yes, but he still carried a sense of duty as proven when he risked his life to save her son Liam. That act of courage had shifted something within her. Marcus might not know the answers she sought. He might have been just as much a victim as her husband. And unlike her husband, Marcus was still alive. He deserved justice for what had been done to him. Clara sighed and leaned back in her chair, the weight of the decision ahead pressing down on her. Clara had come here prepared to negotiate, to offer Marcus's freedom in exchange for the truth. But now, she wanted something different. She wanted to clear his name not as a trade, but because it was the right thing to do. She couldn't bring her husband back, but perhaps she could help Marcus reclaim the life that had been stolen from him. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters, and the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore echoed through the night. In a few hours, she would meet Marcus at Sirens Denver. Would he trust her enough to open up? Would he accept her help? Clara wasn't sure, but she knew one thing she had to try. Marcus leaned on the bar, his leg still aching from the injury he'd sustained earlier that day. The dim lights of Siren's Den reflected off the polished wood, casting long shadows across the room. He nursed a glass of whiskey, his mind heavy with memories he had tried to forget. Saving Liam had stirred something inside him, something he thought he had buried alongside his old life. The door creaked open, and Marcus turned slightly to see Clara walk in. Her red hair caught the low light, and for a moment, he saw not just a determined woman, but someone weighed down by her own ghosts. She spotted him and approached with quiet confidence, taking the seat beside him. "Thanks for meeting me," she said softly. Marcus gave a small nod. "You said you wanted the truth. Guess it's time we both share some of it." Clara hesitated, then spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. 5 years ago, my husband was killed during that heist you were blamed for. They said it was a botched operation involving dirty cops, but I never believed that. I've been searching for answers ever since. Marcus's brow furrowed. "Your husband? He was part of that? And you think I dash?" "No," Clara interrupted gently. "I don't think you killed him. I know you didn't. I have proof footage of what really happened that night. You were set up, just like my husband was a target." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You have proof? Why come to me now?" Clara sighed, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the bar. "At first, I wanted to find out if you knew who orchestrated it all. I thought maybe you had answers I couldn't get anywhere else. But after today, after seeing what kind of man you are, I realized something you were a victim to. You've been punished for something you didn't do, and I can't let that continue." Marcus was silent for a long moment, processing her words. "So, what's your plan?" "I'm a defense attorney," Clara said quietly. "A damn good one, if I say so myself. I want to represent you. With the evidence I have, we can clear your name. You deserve your life back, Marcus. No strings attached." Marcus's gaze softened. He wasn't used to kindness or trust anymore, but Clara's sincerity broke through the walls he had built. He let out a slow breath. "I've spent 5 years trying to forget all of it. I thought it was over. But maybe it's time to stop running." Clara smiled gently. "It's not just for you. It's for the people who still believe in justice, people like my husband. And maybe even your younger self. We can't change the past, but we can fight for the truth." Marcus raised his glass in a silent toast. "To the truth, then." Clara clinked her glass against his. "To justice." And for the first time in years, Marcus felt a spark of hope flicker to life. Marcus stood at the edge of the harbor, the dawn light breaking gently over the restless sea. The chill of the wind no longer bothered him as much as it once had. Behind him, Harbor's Edge was beginning to stir, fishermen preparing their boats, townsfolk going about their morning routines. But today felt different. For the first time in years, Marcus wasn't an outsider. He had earned something he thought he'd lost forever: trust. The battle had been long and grueling, but Clara had fought for him with unrelenting determination. The footage she'd obtained had exposed the truth. He had been set up to take the fall for a crime orchestrated by those in power. The real culprits had been arrested, and Marcus was officially cleared of all charges. News of the case spread quickly, and the whispers of traitor that had haunted him for so long were finally silenced. Clara approached him quietly, her steps light on the wooden pier. Marcus turned to face her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "It's over," she said softly, her voice carrying a sense of finality and relief. Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath of the salt-tinged air. "Yeah, it's over. But what now?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "For the first time in years, I've got options. I could stay here, maybe work with the town search and rescue team. Or I could move on." Clara studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Wherever you go, Marcus, you deserve a fresh start. No one can take that from you now." He glanced at her, gratitude shining in his eyes. "I wouldn't have made it without you, Clara. You gave me my life back. And you saved mine," she replied simply. "We've both found a new beginning." They stood in companionable silence, watching the waves roll in. The weight of the past was still there, but it no longer defined them. Together, they had fought for justice and won. Marcus looked toward the horizon, his voice steady and resolute. "Time to move forward." Clara nodded, linking her arm with his. "Then let's move forward." As the sun climbed higher, casting a warm glow over the harbor, they walked away from the pier, leaving behind the shadows of what once was. It was the dawn of a new chapter, one built on truth, healing, and second chances. The truth was only the beginning, and more stories await. If you love gripping mysteries and powerful journeys of redemption, make sure to subscribe and like for more incredible stories.